And we're live. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me a little bit late this evening. Just getting the old kids to bed and all that sort of stuff. But so tonight I want to talk about Southport in England, this stabbing that has just recently happened. There's riots going on currently as we speak there, following the pattern of Dublin. Really, this seems to be a sort of an emerging thing across the West. I think Dublin is the model for it. I'll get into it. But I wanted to, I'll go through all that. And then almost in more lengthy fashion, I want to talk about the Sinn Féin pivot on immigration. Sinn Féin, Ireland's soon to be, or sort of, well, hitherto were supposed to be the ascendant party in Ireland, but they've stymied themselves on immigration. So that's the kind of whole point on it. They've caught themselves up in knots on immigration, and it's becoming an issue, sort of fucking up the Irish political system, you could say. Sort of by design, sort of interesting. So I'll get into that. And those are my two themes for the night, basically. Now, good to see everybody in the chat there. How are you getting on? I see Emmanuel Godson, Fenolo Mercu, all the usuals. Thank you very much for joining me. Yeah, so whiskeying it up here. Just to kind of unwind. Imperator Scriptorum. I haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. I actually was thinking of you just, I think, yesterday. And it occurred to me, I've had some busy streams. It's sort of, sometimes there's a lot of viewers. It happens that way sometimes, and there's a very quick chat. So whether you've been there or not, I'm not sure. Ed the Statesman as well. What's the crack? How are you getting on? You know, there's some of you here. I'm not going to name names. There's some of you here in the chat I see that I know personally, and there's some I don't. And I don't want to mix. I don't want to mix business with pleasure. I don't want to start like cryptically saying stuff to you. I'll give you a text. The person I'm thinking of there. But yeah, nice to be here anyway. So, you know, I'm like the whiskey thing. It is almost medicinal, because I have I know I always talk about this, but I have these two kids, and young kids, young in age, close in age, and they're not like a lot of kids these days are sort of like feed trained and school trained and sleep trained and all this kind of stuff. They're like, you know, trained up like good little soldiers. They're these kind of child rearing methods, and ours is very much not that way. We like to be a little bit more holistic with the old sleep and stuff. You know, I think there's this thing where you put them in a room and you let them scream until like they learn how to go to sleep or something like that. Anyway, we haven't done that. So sleeping can be a bit tricky in the evening, and it varies, and every month it changes between two of them. So it ends up being difficult to stream, basically. And because if I think I'm going live at a certain time, or I think I'm sitting down to do preparatory research at a certain time, that might not be the case at all. And on any given night, there's no way to know. So it's a bit of a juggling act, trying to like look around online, get sources together, unfolding events in like online world, and then there's real world. So it's a bit of a dose. Trying to put the two together and make them both work. You know, very different worlds, we'll say. Put it that way. So whiskey helps. But yeah, there's some teams, like I want to get it on record. The Southport story is just current affairs. The Sinn Féin one I want to sort of more get on record, so to document that pivot that they've been doing this for years. It's not necessarily new, but they put it in writing, we'll say, just lately. Now Southport is kicking off in England, Merseyside. I don't even know where that is. That's how much I like. Merseyside, is that Manchester? I've never been to England outside of London, central London. So I'm not going to do the whole thing. I often see when stuff kicks off in Ireland, you'll have like English, American figures who will pretend to be like besties with Ireland. Oh, Liverpool, Finola says. There you go. So that's the thing is, Merseyside means Liverpool. Okay. See, I don't know. I've no idea. I couldn't tell you where Newcastle, or I'd say I probably know the basic layout of Germany or France or Spain or Italy better. And there's no reason for that. It just is what I don't know why. Yeah, sorry lads, it's Liverpool, but from what I know, they're not. It's not the whole world apart. But if you want the I kind of want to make a point in itself on this, and it's actually illustrative. Me not knowing necessarily what part of England strictly it's in illustrates this point, which is what I was about to get to, which is that you'll have people, I won't name names, but English and American and all these kind of online commentators will like act like the reporter from the scene of Ireland from their Twitters, talking about, you know, Ruski or Newtown Kennedy or whatever. They'll do all the posting as if they're Irish, you know, almost. They'll sort of what's the word? Just sort of glom onto it, and it's very weird because it's like you don't even know where you don't have no idea where you are on this situation. You're just kind of pretending, copying posts and reposting them as if you're intimate or familiar or a national of Ireland at all. You're not, you know. And I don't purport to talk about this. I don't know England very well. And I certainly don't know this case in detail like I would if it, let's say, had happened in Galway or Dublin or Cork. So if you want the sort of someone who knows the lay of the land, someone who knows all the right journalists on the scene, follows all the right accounts in England and knows it all. I can never claim to do that. I would recommend Steve Laws probably. He's big on Twitter. There's Mark Collette, Laura Towler, those people. There's others, you know. You can, if you like Tommy Robinson, maybe you can watch some of his stuff. Not quite my cup of tea there. Exactly. I think Steve Laws is good, we'll say. Probably a good go-to on Twitter for it. But I just want to speak to some generalities again. I'm not pretending to be Mr. Local in Merseyside, Liverpool. But someone here in the chat says, living in Manchester myself, the military is going to have to be called in. I wonder, is it getting that crazy? I'm kind of curious. My doubts. I know from experience in Ireland that these things can be easily exaggerated, basically, and what can be even the riots in Dublin, if we're being totally real. Lotus Eaters, yeah. Someone mentions in the chat, Rory there in the chat mentions Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin, and a few others. Yeah, those lads are good. But do you know what I mean? So if you want like the real take, like go to English, listen to English lads. I'm not the guy to talk about it in familiar local detail, but so I just about the riots that, you know, a bus on fire on O'Connell Street does not mean the world is falling apart. I was one of the people who was there on O'Connell Street on the night of the riots, and it is more intense in Ireland, I think, than it will be or is in England, the native resistance. But and it was the center. Like, there's a difference between some estate in Southport, some estate where something gets burned, and the city centre of Dublin, the entire central region of Dublin, going into riot, like martial law mode, basically, with riot police everywhere, flashbangs or whatever you call them, things popping off, things blowing up, sort of buses on flames, Lewis on flames, Lewis is on flames, and in flames. And the general chaos of that night was quite spectacular, let's say, in Dublin, and significant. But the other way of looking at it is that, well, yeah, it was just a couple of things burned out in this, you know. It's not like the power structure of Ireland actually came to its knees or any of that. And if that's the case for O'Connell Street on that night, which was significant, it's certainly not the case for, you know, a bus or a wheelie bin goes on fire or whatever with a few police lined up next to a van. You know, you have to moderate these things. We'll see where it goes, but I just think it's you know, it's worth being sort of proportional about these things as well. So let's just look at the story. Most of you will know TLDR, let's say, Southend. There was a Taylor Swift dance event going on with like tweens or young girls, basically between the ages of I think 6 and 11 or 12, young girls, and some random foreigner. We'll say by definition he may have been an English citizen, he may have been raised there, but allegedly it was a man of Rwandan extraction. So you can define foreigner however you want. Allegedly a man of Rwandan extraction, for indeterminate reasons, bust into this place and basically started stabbing left, right, and center. And as of now, has killed 3 little girls, and several more people critically injured. Now, of course, modern medicine keeps people alive. That's why, famously, like infamously, the war deaths are lower these days because it's not so much that it's modern warfare changes it a little bit, but it's also the injury, the ability to keep people who are critically ill sort of alive, basically. Did I say killed? Someone says murdered, not killed. Sorry if I've used the wrong verbiage there or words. Obviously murdered, slaughtered, massacred. Um, or maybe you guys are talking about Palestine. I'm not sure. Anyway, so like that's what happened, right? That's I needn't really go into much more detail. There's all sorts of little details, I'm sure, but that's basically what happened. Now, it follows a trend, and it's funny because you can imagine there being the conspiracy theorist type people. I won't name the names, but the people who like to read a conspiracy into everything, which is like understandable, to be fair, given how things have gone in recent years and decades. But some people who really like to read a conspiracy into everything, you can see how they would start to look at this and say, well, you have Dublin. Like in terms of these random stabbings, you have Dublin, Parnell Street, you have Nantes, France. I think it was Nantes. The foreigner running around the playground stabbing children at random in their buggies. You had a similar one of 2, I think it was teenage girls stabbed in South Germany, in a city or town I can't pronounce, somewhere in South Germany, and you had, of course, Southport. Um, and then you could maybe add in Ashling Murphy as well in Tullamore. Tullamore, a town I kind of like Tullamore, but you know, she's, as they said, going for a jog in the middle of the day, and she gets sort of attacked, like in the middle of the day, by a complete random stranger for no clear motive. So that's the trend between, as far as we know it, Southport, Nantes, Dublin, all these different attacks. It's thematic that it involves, let's say, migrant extraction people, in a time where migration is a big hot button issue, right? It involves extreme random violence. So it's not like I don't know how recently I stumbled across this, but some YouTube suggestion. I don't know why, but it's just some thing about a a these kind of like true crime stuff, right? And I learned about this one case of this murder suicide in County Cavan. A guy who basically went like postal on himself, his family, his kids. Horrific, awful, right? And I was looking at that going, how did I not hear about this? This happened like 5, 6 years ago. How did I not hear about that at the time? And then I started looking into Ireland and similar crimes and, brutal killings and stuff like that, murders. And I realized there's actually loads. There's like a handful or a dozen or a lot of these that I'd heard of one or two, but there were loads more that I hadn't heard of, and I thought this is crazy. So anyway, that's been on my mind recently. But you could say, well, what's the big deal about Southport? See, this is funny because I don't actually know the place. I'm not familiar with it, so it doesn't roll off my tongue. I keep having to remind myself not to say misspeak. But Southport, or Parnell Street or anywhere else like it. you could say, well, what's the big deal in a sense? A couple of people were killed, but there was a woman in Westmeath in Ireland, I think it was a few years ago, who um set her car on fire with like two or three kids in it. Just because for whatever reason. You had a similar one in Newcastle, County Dublin. You had one where a guy killed his ex-girlfriend, her friend, two kids, this kind of stuff in Limerick. You have lots of this stuff. You've gangland stuff where they kill each other for drugs and money and all of this, right? But point being, there are you have the likes of Adam Lanza in the US, these spree shooters, right? So you sort of have to, and in that, someone like Adam Lanza or even the so-called far right ones, these Anders Breivik and the other guy, the New Zealand guy, like you sort of, someone could easily say, well, what's the story there? Like, why the big deal about a handful of people being killed here or there? Even if it is kids, it was kids with Sandy Hook. It was, there were kids probably in Christchurch. So if someone said like, explain why this stands out any more than anything else, and my counter argument to that would be, for one, they all stand out in their own way. So of course, nobody said to the liberal regime in New Zealand or the whole world, when that happened, what's the big deal? Things happen from all different directions all the time. No, like it was made to be. I mean, the entire political landscape of New Zealand was transformed. Gun rights were, I think, thrown in the bin, and the far right, of course, or whatever, became the boogeyman of the century, basically, in New Zealand. Right, the country, it's almost like part of their national DNA now, probably. I mean, strongly, maybe more so than almost anything else. So nobody would have like discounted the what informed that massacre and what the socio-political context to it. So that's one thing. So again, it's just like the whole "don't look back in anger" thing. Like if nobody says "don't look back in anger" when it was supposedly a far right or it was a white person or it was a Christian, anything like that, nobody says "don't look back in anger." Forget about it. Same with, this is just 101 political hypocrisy stuff I'm telling you here, but I'll give you another example. After the the Russian-Ukraine war broke out, nobody, when they were like banning like ballets from like Russians who from doing ballet in London and Dublin and elsewhere, like to completely people with no responsibility for the war in a foreign country. When they were cracking down hard, nobody said like, let's do hug a Muslim or hug a Russian, where a Russian with a blindfold opens their arms for a hug. Like the idea there was, I'm riffing off, of course, the hug a Muslim thing, right? After Bataclan, after Nice, after all of the Munich Christmas market attacks, the whole idea was like, something horrific has happened. Ordinarily, we might get the idea that Muslims are the bad guy, the scapegoat for this horrific thing. It almost seems obvious. But let's show humanity by hugging a Muslim and saying that you're not responsible for it. We can't paint in broad brushstrokes. And we have to remember that no matter how easy it would be to demonize a group in general, we must remember the human beings individually that are involved and almost celebrate and exalt the humanity that we can share among each other or between each other, right? In spite of our darker urges, right? Our more base instincts of vengeance and mob justice and prejudice or whatever, group prejudice. But of course, when it suited the regime, there was no hug a Russian. There was no, hey, I'm just a Russian here, you know. No, none of that. But um, you know, so it's just, yeah. Anyway, that's your hypocrisy, I suppose. You've heard that before. But the other distinction I want to make on this, why, yeah. So on "Don't Look Back in Anger," right? It's "Don't look back in anger" when when it suits, right? But if it's a far right or a Christian or a white or something like that, then it's "look back in extreme anger," right? Uh, Legislate for your country to change. Start teaching different things in secondary schools, indoctrinating children have HR modules at work, whole new suites of laws and hate speech, all this kind of stuff, things you kind of can't say now based on this crime. But when it doesn't suit the regime, they say just don't look back in anger, hold hands, kumbaya, forget about it. It doesn't matter who was attacked. It doesn't matter who the attacker was, and it doesn't matter who was attacked. Let's just mourn loss. That's what ends up happening, right? But the other reason I would say this stands out is because, I mean, it's sort of related to the psycho thing, whether it's the far right or whether it's the Adam Lanzas of this world who sort of have no political motive, really. They're just tapped out. But it's sort of, in a way, it's sort of like the same social dysfunction, let's say, just coming from a migrant angle, where it's like, yes, so you have lots and lots of mentally unstable people who are falling between the cracks and not connected to anything, any sort of organic community or national or religious or social structures. They're disconnected. So in a way, that's sort of like, yeah, actually, the Adam Lances of this world and the Southport stabber, in a way, even if one had a political motivation, one had an ethnic or this or that, it is almost coming from the same place. It's like, yeah, it's a society it's an anti-society, basically. So there's that. But also, there's also the idea that, like, these overly drugged up, the caricature of the white school shooter, which is a myth that white school shooters are disproportionate or any of that. That's actually a myth. It's a Hollywood kind of myth. But like you could take those tapped out, weirdo, drugged up white caricature people, right? Insofar as there are any of them, they're okay. There's a few of that. It's exaggerated, but it exists. You could say, well, yeah, we need our country to engage more with that, to watch what these people get, to monitor people. We need to re-engage social fabric and blah 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 blah. You could take whatever you want away from these issues. Maybe people need to be institutionalized more. Maybe we all need to reach out and speak to each other more. Who knows, right? But that could be your takeaway, and you could say that's what we as a society must do for the likes of these Adam Lanza scenarios. How do we stop that from happening again? How do you intervene? How do you detect these people? You could have a dozen answers on how to do that, and that would be a constructive thing to do for your society to push back the tide on this insanity, let's say, right? But it's kind of hard to do that for the mass migration thing, insofar as there is a trend on this migration thing. You have Puska in Offaly, Aisling Murphy, and you have Southport, you have Nantes, all these random situations that seem to be thematic, right? The hard part about that is that if in the case of Ireland, which has the Republic of Ireland, which had a population of 5 million, in 2022 took in 250,000, which is what, 5% of the population in a year, probably not much less in the following few years after that since. So like you're taking in like huge proportions of your population overnight, and which I'll get onto in a sec, in these ways that are completely, it's ridiculous. It's just human trafficking run amok. It's literally like randomers walk up to your airport and like with like hi, I'm a criminal, I'm a fucking not a person you would really want in your country ever. It's almost like they have a big sign pointed at their face, and they're like given like the 5-star treatment. Please, right this way, sir. It's like, and then he says, "Oh, I'm a dangerous criminal. Do you want to know my identity? Do you want to keep track of where I am, even though you're going to let me in?" They're like, "No, I don't even want that. I just want total chaos." It's a bizarre situation where it's like you've hordes, like legions, I don't even know the word, hundreds of thousands of people, in England's case millions, being brought in annually, and it's just complete bedlam. You don't know where in the world they're from, you don't know who they are, you don't know what kind of psycho they are. The law of averages would say that most of them are not mass murderers, surely, yeah, but to one degree or another, they could be doing crime. Some, of course, a lot of them could just be working or getting the dole or whatever. But you don't know what kind of schemes are going on there because it's just this complete free for all black market. Whereas it's like you and I, you the viewer, and me here. If a norm me as an ordinary Irish middle classish kind of person who like paints between the lines pretty much, if I do something wrong, it'll be quickly noticed. You know, if I don't pay a TV license or whatever, the dragnet will sweep me up quickly if I go 2 kilometers per hour over the speeding limit. But then there's just this whole underworld of like hundreds of thousands of people who are totally foreign, who have no inkling of speaking English, are just from fuck knows where, doing fuck knows what, and it's almost like just like police and the state are intentionally blocking their eyes and ears and telling you that you must block yours as well, and we must just exist with this parallel world going on. Even like you notice in towns where over the course of a month you can notice and go, but there's a lot more Roma in the town recently. Do you notice there's a lot more Indian people or whatever? Suddenly you notice it and you go, somehow, somewhere, this isn't just a random family moved in. Somehow, somewhere, there was some B&B place or a couple of dozen or I don't know what. There was some lever pulled by some NGO or government somewhere, and now just overnight, there's like a markedly more Roma gypsies 1 month to the next in a small rural town in Ireland or whatever. It's like, and you have no right to just be like, what the fuck is going on? Like who are they? Oh, maybe I don't have a right to know who they are, but do you, the state, know who they are? Do you really know who they are? Because like at least say what you want about me or you, the viewer. The state knows who you are. Like if it wants to, it knows who you are and what you are. I can go right back to your junior infants drawings and get a record and the whole lot, right? So that's true for all of us, but we just don't know on the other side. And it would be one thing if it were a dozen or two people. It's not. It's hundreds and hundreds of thousands. It's rapid replacement, right? In before your very eyes. So when that phenomenon then manifests sort of stabbing bunches of children at random, suddenly then it's sort of, you can see how it's distinct from the Adam Lanzas or the gangland uh, crime, like mob crime or whatever. You name it, the various ways in which innocent people can get killed in modern society, and it's awful. There's a distinct feature about that because it plugs itself into the issue of the day, right? And it's sort of like I say, with these drugged up lunatic Adam Lanza types or weirdos, you could say let's adjust society to sort of be to identify these people before they do these things somehow, whatever, right? You could even say let's control for guns or whatever in America. You can have your niche response to what you should do, but what's your niche response to like millions of people being driven into your country where no one knows who they are, what sort of lunatic they are, right? And what sort of grudges they have, and the rest of it. Well, what's the answer to that? The answer is to say we don't want that. We want that to stop, right? Same way we have solutions to Adam Lanza: stop drugging people up, pay more attention to people, don't let people fall through the cracks socially and become total weirdos. Watch how much time people spend online. Take the guns away, mental health checks, all this. You could say that, and someone could say, yeah, that's grand. Those are solutions to that obvious issue. The solution to this, obviously, if you say, well, yeah, what are like, if we agree that it is a trend of random foreigners stabbing people in playgrounds and stuff, like obscene shit like that, where there's no relationship between them. I'll give you another one, right? And I'm stepping in controversial waters here because some NGO could misquote me uncharitably here, saying I think, a crass comparison, right? But I keep mentioning Adam Lanza. You could say that, like, well, someone like him or the Columbine or whatever, these weirdos, basically, right? They go to their school where they went to school, the cliche, right? These people didn't understand me. They go in and they feel alienated, whatever it is, right? You could at least say, well, it's a bad egg from that community who went to that school who turned against it and did the whole, what's the Pearl Jam song again? Whatever that song is, Jeremy, right? That sort of idea. It's twisted. It has to be stopped. That's awful. People dying is people dying. But you kind of go, well, yeah, at least that community has some chance to recognize a malevolent, alienated psycho within their ranks over time, organically. You could be like, well, at least maybe someone might have spotted that and thought, oh, well, we all know Jimmy. I used to talk to him years ago. He was kind of normal. Then he went weird, and now he hasn't showed up for ages, and it's very strange. And then his mom knows he's on all these drugs, and someone else knows he's got all these guns or whatever. You could say like, well, yeah, at least that weird bad egg is somewhat in that community, if that makes sense. Whereas you don't know, like nobody in Tullamore knows Joseph Puska. He doesn't even speak English. Like there's no chance at all to sort of vet that out or see it or know it because it's unknowable. You can't know Joseph Puska because he's a Roma Gypsy and he doesn't speak English. And I'm sure he had no interest in integrating himself. Never mind what anybody else wanted. So it's like it's qualitatively distinct from everything else, right? It's not that a person murderer of one background or description is people dying is people dying. That's the quantitative thing, I suppose, if you want to look at it that way. But the quality of how this works, it's almost like, and that's what's scary about it, right? Is that if I go, let's say I'm taking a evening course, right? And I'm in there and I kind of go, or God knows, I'm trying to like spitball here. You're in school, you get to know the weirdo in your class. You might talk to them, you might reach out to them, whatever. Or these awful family murders you hear about, right? Where like the mother or the father, they kind of go nuts or whatever. I find it extremely disturbing. But that or husband and wife, the classic domestic issue, right? Husband kills the wife, vice versa. Um, there's a comfort people take in the idea that well, I sort of know my wife, and a wife knows her husband, and she can gauge how violent he's becoming, and she is somewhat familiar with that. And her family know that he's a bit angry, or he might be plotting against her, or she's plotting against him, and the rest of it, right? So you can take your own, you can see that happen in front of you and gauge your own life, that kind of way. If I want to get involved with some tough lads, estate lads who are dealing, and I want to say I'm going to get in on the grift here, well, maybe someday I'm going to end up inside there getting my kneecaps bust in or whatever, right? I can kind of feel that out for myself and make my choices in some fashion, or at least gauge danger in some way. The scary thing people have about these random migrants walking into a playground stabbing children is that it's completely random. If that migrant walks in with a knife and starts stabbing, no one knows who he is in the playground. None of the mothers and fathers there, right? They say no one knows who he is, but it extends further because you go, okay, well, we don't know who he is in the playground. That's maybe understandable. It's a random man. We can't all be expected to know everybody. But if you extend it out and you go, okay, none of us in this playground know who the guy is, but does anybody else, if you expand the radius for a mile around, does anybody else know who he is besides this niche community of ethnic, national community, a dozen people in the town or whatever it is, you live in this little place with them or whatever. Put with them aside, does anybody else know who he is? You go down to the guard station or the police station, you say, do you know who he is? You go to a government database, you go, do you know who he is? Does like you expand it from the playground all the way out, right? All the way out to the shores of your country. And you go, does anybody know who the fuck this guy is? And the answer is no, no. None of us know who this guy is. No computer, no person, no school, no whatever. This is just a ghost, basically, right? And they're being pumped into our country by the tens and hundreds and millions of, or hundreds of thousands and millions, right? Now, that is distinct. That's what I'm saying. I'm just making the argument as for why that is a distinct phenomenon. And so for people to get riled up by these things happening, it's legitimate. Here, look, people are going to start thinking about this now with their kids. I mean, I don't want to even speak it into, it's like, put it this way. If your kids aren't, if you go out with them, you watch your like peripheral constantly, right? And then when it comes to the point where you want to hand your kids over, it could be to a play school, it could be to a school, it could be to a whoever, right? You sort of find yourself thinking, okay, if I'm going to drop, let's say you're dropping a kid off to a creche or a play school or something, you find yourself like wanting to maybe now start asking them, um, like ordinarily you might just have a door, like a door, normal door, but like what kind of gate have you got? What kind of locked, extremely well locked gate do you have? Like, I want to know what your security op is here. Which, look, 30 years ago in Ireland, you would have never thought like that. You would have thought there's adults there. Worst is going to happen is some bumbling weirdo is going to walk in or something, and they'll like shepherd him out. The idea that some random man that nobody, not only in the village, the town, the hinterland, the country, the capital city, the computer databases, the guards, nobody knows who this fella is. And he could walk into a little town in rural Ireland, into a creche, and start stabbing left, right, and centre. Because who knows who he is? He came from, there's a big world of 8 billion people out there. There could be a lot of psychos and like maladjusted people in there. And I suppose the TLDR and what I'm saying is that at least within a reasonably familiar national situation, both in terms of the logistic, like the databases of like government surveillance or whatever you want to call it, the guards, like having files on everybody basically in terms of whether you're mentally unstable or vetted or this or that or the other, the official side of it. And then more importantly, I would say the unofficial side of it, that you're in your town, you basically know more or less, like someone can move into a new house, a new neighbor or whatever with a circumspect background or whatever. That can happen, but it'll be sort of one at a time. Generally speaking, within your neighborhood and town and your school and the place where your kid goes to school and the rest of it, you're able to have a good gauge on who's who and what. That's this normal society we all grew up in. That's human nature, is to exist in that order. So to throw chaos to it, it just means that you've no idea, you've no way to gauge who's who and what's what and who you need to watch out for. Again, you could have a town where you go, that fella there who walks around, he's a little bit simple. Let's just say you wouldn't be leaving him alone with the kids. That other guy around there, he could lash out. You'd never know what that guy would do. He's a bit, etc. You could do that by identifying them. Whereas it's an overwhelming situation when you just don't know where they're at. So anyway, I've belabored the point. So that's the problem, and that's why it sort of let's say needs to be. Well, it's just going to create lots and lots of civil unrest and anguish and death. So it's just also very sad, of course. The girls who died. So you have here. Bebe or Babe, I don't know, Bebe. I'll call it Bebe. Bebe King, 7-year-old, so a 6-year-old. That girl is a 6-year-old. 7-year-old Elsie Dot Stancombe and a 9-year-old Alicia De Silva Aguiar. Like 3 little girls. I don't know. I don't like. Again, the thing that gets me is that at least these weird school shooters go into their school where they feel like they didn't belong or they weren't understood or whatever it is, right? Whereas it's like, what can the relationship be to a Taylor Swift dance class with little girls? Like, there's just no connection for this allegedly Rwandan man. It's also kind of surreal as Taylor Swift class. I've seen the photos as well. Someone in the chat mentions it's very sad. But like a Taylor Swift thing being met with this, it just reminds me of the riots in Kulak where a guard was going in full riot gear asking people for their receipts for their chicken nuggets, in this sort of chaotic totalitarian situation. It's one of those like juxtapositions, I'd say. It kind of defines the modern West horribly. But yeah, so 3 dead, and that's what it is. I mean, let's have a look at some of the scenes from Southport Southport. I keep thinking Southend or Southgate. By the way, this is a huge invite for Feds. Like Feds will be like onto me here, but if anyone in England ever wants to like has a spare Airbnb or whatever, someone I know or someone who I know by extension, some like spare Airbnb or something and wants to invite me for a holiday over there, I'll rent a car and I'll drive around. I'll get to know the place better. Just throwing it out there. But so yeah, so here's some of the riot because I would love to get to know England outside of London, like the Southwest and the Yorkshire Dales, everything. I would love to get to know all of it, and to also see the absolute state of the cities because I know it's far deeper than it is in Ireland. Let's just say. I've seen parts of London. Oof, my lord, not good, not good. England is through the looking glass, I'll tell you that. But yeah. So here's some mistakes, lads. Shouting anti-Muslim chants. So yeah, some so it's all Muslims this, Muslims that is the latest thing. So I don't know. I want to check what's going on. You know what? I'm thinking of jettisoning the Sinn Féin story because it's late in the night. I'm tired. I could just do that tomorrow, just as well. It's just another. I could just go on tomorrow night because you know it's packing too much in. I'd rather shoot the breeze casually tonight without overstretching it. Yeah, I just want to look. I'm checking on chat here. Yeah, I don't know the look. If any of you, the overplaying the Muslim thing always worries me because, of course, I've seen parts of London. I've seen parts of London are bad and they're like deeply like it's like Pakistan, it's like Karachi basically, and it's like often cases it can be like 3 generations deep and stuff. And it's not like in Ireland where you see even like a lot of Muslim or Indian or Roma or whatever you name it. There's a feeling in Ireland that even if they're in big numbers somewhere, with the exception perhaps of the early 2000s African anchor baby generation in the likes of Balbriggan and Blanchardstown, that is quite England-esque, where you go, there's a lot of these people, and a lot of them were born here, and there's a whole lot of them. But aside from that, all the multiculturalism, diversity, or whatever in Ireland that I see currently has this sort of unrooted quality to it, let's just say. Whereas I get the impression with a lot of England that it's fairly well rooted in a sense, and you feel that like in from what I've seen in parts of London, you go, yeah, these people aren't like immigrants even, like a lot of them are, but a lot of them don't. You can see they don't feel that way. They feel like they're in their place, like it's something else. I'm just checking something here, lads. Um, yeah. So sorry, I was just trying to catch up on what's happening in Southport, but I'll do a bit more of that now as well. Sorry. I just want to keep abreast of it. Yeah, look, as far as I can see, it's people throwing bricks at riot shields and the usual, right? So nothing, the world changing. But I mentioned at the start the idea of someone says have a look around Birmingham. I'm telling you, I would actually love it. I would love a trip around England to see the Yorkshire Dales and to see the beauty of old England, right, and enjoy it. But also to go into the heart of Birmingham and sort of just drink it in because from what I'm told, that's worse than a lot of even parts of England or sorry, London. Like there's a lot of Irish. Yeah, I love meeting Gen X people from England who live in Ireland, you know, and they've set up their life somewhere in the west of Ireland. They bought a cheap house and they raised their kid, and they're growing a bit of organic veg out in the patch or whatever. And you go, so obviously you're English. What's the story? Have you been here a long time, or whereabouts were you from? Tell me about yourself. And they'll go, oh yeah. Often they might be a bit crunchy, a bit liberal, sort of as well, maybe. But you go, so what part of England are you from? Tell me. And they go, oh well, we came over in the, let's say, mid noughties, and we were living in Birmingham, and yeah, just the city, oh, just too much city. And if you didn't know any better, you'd be thinking, oh, it must be the hustle and bustle, the fast paced life, the rat race, the Sex in the City type of cocktails and computers and traffic and parking meters. And I can understand how cities are just would wreck your head, and you want a nice garden, and that's nice actually. A slower, nice pace of life, more wood, all that type of stuff. And what what they don't tell you is that they're white flighting. They white flighted all the way out to the tip end of the Atlantic in Ireland because they were running away from foreigners, basically. But it's just kind of funny, and of course that goes unspoken. Um, but it's always whenever they say they're from Birmingham, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. Um, so, and there is this, of course. There's a new genre online of like bald and bankrupt and stuff where they're going around um looking at how third world England is basically. Now Ireland isn't far behind it. Like I don't mean this in like a sectarian way, but just England is extremely advanced in its decline, I would say, in its like multicultural decline. It might be the worst. I don't know. I've heard Canada's really bad. But at least Canada's a big spacious place, in a sense. There's something about England. It's the police as well with their little clipboards. Like they come in, they say, "Hey, we just want to talk about some posts you made online," and with the nice sweet voice and the accent and all that. It's just like, and their tasers. They're always going around the place with their tasers. It's like it's a mix of like it's the perfect horrible in between like a police officer just having a gun. At least that's sort of virile, or having no gun because there's still a community, there's still a level of trust and reciprocity in the country, so they just don't have them. They don't operate that way. It's only maybe specialized units or whatever. So it's like neither of those worlds. It's the yellow taser. It's even like it looks like the taser a fella like a security guard in Tesco would have. The uniforms look that way. The Irish Garda uniforms are going that way too. It's just a bureaucratic, smarmy, like plasticine form of totalitarianism, with a smile, with a rainbow flag on it, it's just horrible. So I don't know. That's just that's the vibes I get off England now. Whereas in Ireland, it's like all of that is like we might have the same thing coming for us for sure, like at a fast rate, but the hooks just aren't in yet, and the revolution has begun really in Ireland. Like we might all be so cooked out by the system, our jobs, and all that we can't talk about it. But I think most Irish people know, and the culture wars of post 2016 happened and have developed and matured. That Irish people in their identity and their resentment, their dark resentment against this stuff, and sort of we see it in Ireland. The protest movements and stuff are huge. That like anything that happens from here on in is sort of expressly happening without the consent, not just of estates, but of middle class people, upper class people, all sorts of people. Right? It's like this is universally been demonstrated to not be wanted in Ireland over and over and over again by every class openly with the support of the whole world looking in on us. And so that's happening before it gets its teeth in. You know what I mean? So it's illegitimate from day one. You could say the same for Enoch Powell back in the day, maybe in England. I don't know, but I don't know if it makes sense what I'm saying there to you. It makes sense to me that like because the world basically the Western world is running on fumes with this diversity and replacement stuff. It's basically it's reaching peak universal exhausted illegitimacy across the entire West, and that's happening at a time before it has gone deep into Irish society or Irish structures. So it's, you could almost imagine it. There's a world where you can imagine it being somewhat undone, whereas in England you'd have to like really, let's just say, kicking and screaming a little bit more over there, perhaps. But so yeah, Imperator Scriptorum says it's important to remember that the English did try to resist this when it was starting. They had Enoch Powell, NF, BNP, and all that. I agree. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's the internet factor. Maybe it's the. I think it is the internet factor. The fact that the whole Western world is watching. Like, we don't have to depend on there just being this sort of internal battle within Ireland between the regime and dissident people. The dissident people sort of in Ireland, including myself, can draw energy from the entire onlooking world in real time. So we can sort of, there's almost this larger tsunami of movement across the West that we are in a, Ireland is in a good position on. Whereas England, when it was doing its own thing with the, Pells and the rest of it, was they were out ahead of the current entirely. They weren't, they were in the wrong position, traveling in the wrong direction 40, 50 years too early, sort of thing. Maybe that may or may not make sense, but I don't know. I'm not like, if any English watching here, I'm not trying to like blackpill you or whatever. Like I'd love. I feel the same way about England. I've no like sectarian drama or whatever. Like the six counties is the six counties, and whatever the Irish history is what it is. I just taking England in itself, the country in itself. Um, it's an important part of Europe. It's on the western. It's like part of the archipelago, whatever. Um, it's a bastion of European civilization. Um, it's just people I like. I have a lot of English pals and stuff as well. I don't know. And it's just like even like a Japan, even like I've never been to Japan. I don't know many Japanese people, but I just don't like to see Japan go to shit. None of us do. Or even like Ghana. I wouldn't want Ghana to go. I want Ghana to kind of be Ghanaian. I don't want everything to just turn into vape shops and Marvel films and Turkish barbers and the rest of it, right? And shitty everything, generic slop world. So yeah, just any don't. When I talk about how far gone England is, I lament that desperately. But to be honest, just as I do France, Germany, any part of Europe, but maybe more so England because it's more similar to Ireland. It's disturbing to see it. Um, it's disturbing to see it, and I wonder. Actually, let's get on to this. The final thing. So I'm not going to talk about Sinn Féin tonight, but I just want to. This actually flows quite well. It was Dapper Laughs. So I don't know what any of you remember Dapper Laughs. Daniel O'Reilly. Back in the day, he was wouldn't be my type of thing at all. Like lad humor, way humor, getting shagging birds or whatever humor, like just very. It was like the humor when I was a teenager out there, in betweeners, Dapper Laughs. It's kind of like I find it almost disturbing, actually. No offense to the lad, but that sort of culture, whatever it was, and I'm not trying to be like a blue haired. I'm not offended, like in that sense. Say whatever you want around me. But it was just sort of weird. Anyway, Dapper Laughs was a comedian, is a comedian, I don't know. Did a certain style of comedy, lad Dino culture, whatever, right? And he is what he is, but he's one of these low key sort of nationalist people, a little bit like an English patriot. I don't know. But he made a post. It's just for what it's worth, lads. Right? He put up this post lamenting and being angry about the Southport stabbing massacre. Right? Same way a million people did. Whatever. But what stands out about this to me is that, well, it is actually very interesting. So he started out saying, I'll read it to you. He said, "Some sick cunt has stabbed a load of little girls at a Taylor Swift dance class." This is like when it happened. "Maybe killed some. It's honestly broken my heart. I'm fucking selling up and leaving. Fuck this place. It's full of wrong'uns. It's done. I ain't bringing up my three daughters in this shithole." So basically the whole, like, I'm getting away. I'm going to move to Porto or, wherever. La Paz, Buenos Aires, uh, Wellington, where, I don't know, Osaka. Pick your weird little place where you think it's better or something, right? St. Petersburg. That probably is decent enough. Let's be real. But so although cold, um, but yeah, he's doing that whole thing, and then some people pushed back on him, and then he retorted back to that, which I will read in a second. But then, if this isn't too complicated yet, um, one of the replies was Michael Owen. This is a real blast from the past. So we're going back to like when I was in secondary school, which is the 2000s, maybe the late 2000s. So 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere there. College, secondary school, college. But if you want to go back another, like to when I was a child, Michael Owen was, for those Zoomers among you, he was a famous soccer player playing for Liverpool, Merseyside. He was like the big star of the day, right? I don't know who was he. He was like your Ronaldo or whatever back in the day, right? And he said, he comments on Dapper Laughs' post and says, "Well said." So you have mainstream figures coming in on it now, talking about this. And but anyway, so I found this just very profound in a way. And let me caveat even more. He ends up in the replies sort of saying, "Oh, I'm just talking about illegal immigration. I have no problem with legal immigration, and I don't care what ethnicity the stabber was." La la la, which is like clearly bullshit, because we all know low key he's angry and what he's talking about. Wink, wink. It's sort of like, well, if you don't even have the balls to just like everybody, left, right, critic and fan alike, knows what you're talking about. So when you come out and say, "Oh, no, it's just illegal and it's I don't care what the ethnicity is," it's like, well, you obviously do actually. It's kind of like patently obvious that you do. So just with that in mind, like, I'm highly critical both of your man's like comedy back in the day. I don't think it was funny, and even his like political fleshed out, how he's coming at this sort of current crusade of his, I think is like dumb and like not sophisticated at all. If you want sophisticated, go to Steve Laws, go to Mark Holloway, Laura Towler, you name it, whoever, right? Go to there's lots of people. There's like high Tory types who are actually half decent, and there's like even George Galloway is pretty good, right? Like sophisticated and all this from a what you'd call a tanky left sort of position. Dapper Laughs is not your go-to, right, for political sophistication. Fine. But in his sort of splurted out piece, he does actually get at a certain, I think, sort of futile exasperation that's out there among, and his whole brand, of course, is to sort of tap into and read the frequency and be the Dino of the world, right? To sort of speak like the Dino. He's not meant to speak like George Galloway. He's not meant to speak like, I don't know, Jacob Rees-Mogg or some Tradcats, whatever, LARPer, right? He's is what he is, and so when you listen to him, you're hearing in reverse the sort of mindset of the Dino being the like average like British bloke, white bloke who has like a couple of kids and just middle class, like somewhere in the middle class, upper mid, lower mid, squeeze mid, whatever, somewhere just like not a crazy mad landlord, not an absolute dolehead, where either way they don't quite have to worry about the worst excesses of the problems of the country. They are actually the butt of the entire joke, right? Middle class, the native middle class, and he's sort of speaking to that a little bit. So I'm out of whiskey, big problems, lads, big problems. So Like I'll just read it to you because it stuck out to me anyway at the time, and then I'll wrap it up. Right? He says the amount of people saying "stay and fight," like this is some war movie. You can't fight. You can't even protest without being called racist. For one, okay, I'm jumping in already. We need to get over that, right? He said you can't even protest without being called racist. What the fuck? It's like maybe just grow up here and say I don't care if you call me. I don't care what you call me, right? So like stand and fight. You can't even stand and fight without being called racist. Okay, then stand and fight, be called racist, and keep going. Like what's to be? I suppose the idea is there is that you get cancelled from your ordinary job and you put into penury and maybe have your lose your family and your house and your home and your car and everything. So I mean, he's got a point. Okay. So I'll go on. He says, and fight who? This is interesting. I thought he said, and fight who? How? The whole, which is great. He's actually hitting the mark. He's like, fight who? How? It's a good point. It's like, who do you fight and how? Who is this nebulous beast responsible for this? This is a bizarre situation that if you got a room of 1,000 random people off the street from across the country at random blindfold, like you just pick them out and said, who here thinks this makes any sense? You get like 3 or 4 people out of 1,000 who would say, I do. And it wouldn't take long for you to be like, what's your job? I work for an NGO. I'm a journalist. Like, okay, so you're paid. You work in a HR department or whatever. But anyone who's not paid directly to have that belief, yeah, you get like a 99.99 sort of tally on that. We're all against it. So why is it happening? Like what government? The Sinn Féin thing I'll get into tomorrow. So it's like the government, the opposition, the others, the media critics within the media, sort of mainstream, all of them are agreed on this thing. And it's even when they criticize each other, the criticism makes no sense. They all are saying the same thing. None of them seem to have the capacity to just say, I think we should all stop entirely. Not we should check passports a little bit better because it's just the illegal. It's like no, it's not that we need to check passports a bit better. We do for sure, but we need far, far more than that. And when someone says, well, that's contravening the 1951 declaration and blah, 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 which means you have to take 150,000 or your economy collapses. Like, there's so many bridges we need to cross where we're like, if our economy collapses, who's collapsing it? What's happening? Why, like, if a country decided to say, we're actually fucking out all these fake asylum seekers who came here in the last 5-10 years, to begin with, that's for starters. I don't care what convention you wave at me. And then the NATO/European collective security defense force that they're building, or whatever, starts like F-16ing you from above, or they start ripping out your currency through central banking and all that kind of stuff. They just destroy your economy. And the rest of it, it's kind of like, well, who are they? Why are they doing that? And why is it okay for China to do all that stuff? No bother with all these like international institutions. Why Singapore basically free to do what they like? Indonesia, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Cuba. Like we're already at like I don't know, the entirety of Africa. Like we're at the Middle East, right? Iran, Saudi Arabia. Like we're at like probably 2/3 of the world's population there, I'd say nearly. And what's going on? And so like all the like it's like no, we need to do a lot more than check passports. Like there's barely a foreigner in China, right? So I mean, I want to talk more about this with Sinn Féin tomorrow. I'm kind of bleeding in from that a little bit. I'll talk about that tomorrow. But excuse me. So, like it's like there's so much fakeness. Even so let's say there's a debate, like there's even the Reform UK stuff and all that. And it's so much of it is fake, and it's just like lads, it's actually not extreme to say that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people need to go home straight away. Like that's not crazy at all. Actually, it's not crazy. Like it wouldn't be crazy if you were in China. It wouldn't be crazy if you were in India or anywhere else, any other time in history. It's only here and now. So what are we ruled by? Who are these governments? Who are these fake opposition parties? Like he's on. Sorry, I've gone wandering. Point is, he's saying fight who? How? It's like, yeah, it's a good question. It's like you don't fight Xi Jinping or you don't fight the the Shah or the Ayatollah or the great leader or the guardian council or the king, or it's like or the government even, because you could totally fight the government as they are, but of course they don't really decide anything in the West. This, like, he's right to be exasperated, this Dapper Laughs. Fight who? How? That's the feeling people have, is like, it's one thing to be ruled badly by your leader, by your power center, by your identifiable power structure, but to be ruled badly isn't even the start. Like, it's way worse than badly. Being ruled badly is potholes aren't being quite fixed the way you'd like them to be. This is military, I always say, military steamrolling, right? By some entity, force, dynamic that you can't even really identify at all. So that's Dapper Laughs. He says, and bear in mind, this is again what a lot of people in England, lads, are thinking when they see these stabbings happen, right? So they might, for the most part, they ignore it. They go to work, they come home, they have their dinner, and most days, someone like me is going on, and they're happy to just kind of keep the head out of it. You know, get their gym on, whatever. Do their, when something like this happens, what they know all along bursts out, right? He says the whole country is fucked. The water companies, and he talks about a lot more than just the migration thing. And by the way, I agree with that. It's not just migration; it's everything. Excuse me, is just completely fucking people, left, right, and center. So he says, the water companies robbed us and dumped shit in the water. You can't swim anywhere. You'll get ill and die. I'm not sure about that, but anyway, I don't know England water. English water. So the country is literally a shithole. The councils are bankrupt and can't even fix a pothole and charge you council tax for the privilege of doing fuck all while robbing you. Money's taxed, cars taxed, petrol's taxed, booze, food, everything is taxed. Then if you manage to save enough money after it's been taxed to buy a house, you get taxed on that. Then if you die and pass it on to your kids, that gets taxed. They literally want everything from the working man while they hide their money. It's a con. We are all being conned. He's very right. So again, the people trying to set up this this Kulak asylum center place. Of course, this is Remcall Capital or some blah blah blah. Shareholders diffused. One's living in Switzerland, the others here, the others there. It's all good. These types of people are earning millions and millions just on passive income, basically, from just malfeasance. In my view, like I think it's sort of malfeasance to even engage in this business. The whole thing is, in my book, illegal. Not technically, it's not literally illegal. It's all perfectly legal, but that's just a technicality. It should all be illegal. It should be criminal. And they just kind of rake up this passive income from taxpayers, rent seeking, the whole lot of it, just shareholder dividends, whatever, you name it. But it's this kind of slave plantation type of bizarre thing going on, and plantation system, and they're earning this money, and then someone who just has barely enough to get by or whatever is getting taxed and taxed and taxed and taxed. And recently, again, they're talking about inheritance tax. So now you try to hand back, like upping the inheritance tax and all that. So when you hand down your scaldy house you worked your whole life to just build, maintain, put a new roof on, you know, get it all together, pay off the mortgage finally, twice what you actually paid for the house, nearly, pay that off. The price of the house originally was double inflated anyway because of mass migration. It cost twice as much as it should have on the market. And then the mortgage is like a lot more on top of that. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cough. You finally pay off all that, and like at your deathbed, and then they just pull it out from under you for your kids. Your kids get this sort of busted apart, broken up asset. It's like, okay, so they get that, what, to pay for these billions in asylum centers for these fellas who go around stabbing people potentially here and there, right? It's just, I mean, I'm just rambling, I suppose, at this point, just like Dapper Laughs says. But he goes on. He goes, we're about to be taxed even more. NHS is fucked. Cost of living is fucked. Excuse the language here, lads. Interest rates fucked. We got years of it getting worse before it gets better. No, it's not going to get better, Dapper Laughs. I'm sorry. I hate to tell you. London's a hellhole and unsafe after dark. I hate it. The men think they're women. Kids are encouraged to think about their sexuality and gender. Soldiers getting stabbed. Police are pussies. The ones that ain't get fired. The ones, and that's before getting started on illegal immigration. La la la. If my country ever needed me to actually fight, I'd be there 100%. But I ain't gambling the lives of my three daughters in the meantime. And even if they did survive growing up here, for what? To live in a shithole full of fucking weirdos. No thanks. Um, yeah, it's crazy. So, like, he's saying, like, if my country needed me, like, if, and it's a good point. It's like, if I actually had a country, it's a very interesting point because it's like, if I had a country, like a power structure, a system, an organized state, from the top down to the grassroots of the community, the GA club, the tidy towns, the whatever, right up to the highest halls of government, all the way up and down and across in the media and the social institutions and the rest. If that whole thing, which was like corollary or parallel, like sorry, like what's the word? If that tracked with the actual organic people within the society in some fashion, and that I would fight for that thing. No problem. If it needed me to go to war or to defend it from outsiders coming in or whatever, but provided that the society itself, the core power structure of the society, had my back while I do that. It's a very interesting thought that, okay, so you would fight for your country and for your people and for your way of life and all that, and for your family and community, the whole thing, your history, your heritage. You'd fight for all that and your rights as a human being within an organic society, let's say, against power exploitation. You would fight for all that, provided the core power structure were on your side. But if it's not, I just have to walk away and fuck off. I do find that kind of weak in a way. It's like, well, the whole point of like you needing to fight, whether you mean that rhetorically, like fight, push back, or sacrifice and all that. Well, the real fight in encompasses that the power structure wouldn't be on your side. Because if it was, I mean, it's like actually quite handy, if there was an internal enemy within your country, a foreign internal enemy, fifth column or whatever, that was to be repudiated in some way, and the whole structure and state were on your side, and it was, if you went out and you castigated that person, the state would reward you with a medal and give you a compensation and all this. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, a lot of people would fight for their country and their people and all that then, wouldn't they? But almost everybody would, like, because there would be great pride and celebration and all that to go with it. But and protection, you'd be protected by the mob, basically, as part of this patriotic struggle. But this patriotic struggle doesn't involve being supported. It's the exact opposite. You are in the absolute darkest pit imaginable. So it's kind of an ironic thing there that he's talking about it like that. But I also see where he's coming from. So then he says, where would I go? Somewhere with a backbone, a bit of sun, and less risk for your kids getting murdered, like Australia, Russia, or fucking North Korea. I wholeheartedly encourage anyone with young kids that has the ability to leave to do so. Today's events in Southport have rocked me to the core. I'm sat here looking at my daughters feeling sad. You can still work on trying to get your voice heard while your kids are safe. I want my kids to live, not survive. I mean, I have those thoughts too. I don't know if you do, lads, who whichever ones of you have kids. I don't mean to play the whole kid haver parent sort of vibe, like, oh well, you have to have kids to have a mindset like X, Y, and Z. But it is true a bit, because if you're, let's say, if you're like a easy breezy single tech bro making loads of money, living a good life in the city, or if you're a neat or something, you can just live inside in your little world. It doesn't matter what the fuck is going on around you, as long as the immediate, you're like 5 feet either side of you, is good at any given time. It's sort of okay, as a man especially. But when you've kids, I've said this before, but the entire fabric of the society around you becomes immediately apparent, right? Because you know that they have to live in it. They will have to grow into it and live in it. Um, and I think about this stuff all the time. Like, same way Dapper Laughs is thinking about it. Like, even I, the dissident who is against, what a embarrassment it would be for me to flee and all this, right? I've laid so much on the line. But even me, and I feel like I've said to many people, I don't think I'll ever go, right? Under very, very, very limited circumstances would I go. And even then it'd be temporary, let's say. But I really don't think I would. Maybe there's no circumstance, but where I personally would leave. But like, there are times I look around and I just think this is just a big flaming heap. It's such a dark, and I'm not trying to blackpill you, by the way. I'm a lighthearted person, but it's such a dark environment to raise a child in. The sense of hopelessness, especially when these things happen. Arnold Street, Southport, yeah. And just seeing certain things, it's like you just think, you know what? If I could just run away and there was some like little weird fake, not even fake, but like let's say there was even like a fake place, and even if it was kind of multicultural, I don't know, what am I even saying here? Like either a fake place that's got an iron fist, like the likes of Singapore or Dubai or something like that, where it's like totally safe and polite and all that, or somewhere in Bhutan. Bhutan always jumps out at me. If you're not familiar with it, look it up. A sort of a place that's in between geopolitical powers of the world, sort of disconnected by choice, but also not a complete lunatic asylum, where you could truly raise kids and just live and just kind of be at peace. Like there's no crazy crime, there's no random bunch of 500 African men between the ages of 25 and 35 showing up overnight, and you've no right to even observe that that's happening, really. Or, oh, look, this we're all going playing football, and now there's a 6 foot man gets to play with the women, which would be bizarre enough, but more bizarrely is that the whole country is at gunpoint to talk about it, really. You're not allowed. So it's somewhere, it's not even that there's a man playing the women's football, it's that that there's a state out there who backs that, and that state has all the power, and you sort of have none. That's what's really worrying, because it's not the actual individual man playing a football match somewhere, swimming or UFC or whatever it is, right? It's just that you go, I know the power structure wants this or something, and it knows that we're all offended, and it just is pursuing it anyway. Like that's the totalitarian aspect of it. It's like, but what that makes me feel unsafe. Like why is the power structure not just taking a little brown envelope for itself, making a little bit of money, corrupt or whatever, but overall then just sort of administrating over to society reasonably uh, appropriately, just for the governed and the governed, the governing and the governed, right? Why isn't there just a basic like understanding there? To feel at the butt end of hostility there is sad. So if you're in somewhere like Bhutan, you just live your life every day. Don't go out of your way. Don't be criminal. Don't be antisocial. Don't stick, just mind your own business, have your life. And it's grand. It's a nice place. Like, regardless of your political views in that country, you can go up and down the street, your kids can play. Places sort of has a continuity to it, like from one decade to another. It's sort of like this families and communities, and it all makes some sense. It's tempting to think, what if I could just run to that and abandon it all and just say, you know what, I would be in a place where I could just fucking breathe and think my kids can play and run around and grow up, and they, even though they're in this bizarre Bhutan, there's actually more coherency to their life there than they could ever have in Ireland, because Ireland is more foreign by a long shot in a way, and hostile and changing and against their interests, and they're the bad guy. At least in Bhutan they wouldn't be the bad guy, they'd just be whatever, they're just there. There'd be more of the bad guy in Ireland, more systemically oppressed and discriminated against, and all the rest of it. It's a dark thing. So I can see where your man's coming from. But and then Mike, just after all that, I even though he's like cursing and effing and blinding, and he's Dapper Laughs being Dapper Laughs, it's not exactly, high end political analysis or whatever. At the end of the day, he actually is touching off a lot of deep issues. And then after all that comes in Michael Owen. Michael Owen from Liverpool, from like Shredded Wheat. I think he did ads for that or something. He's like, well said, with a clapping emoji. It's just, what sort of bizarre timeline? What world am I living in? Can I just wake up? Can I just wake up in the Shire? You know what I mean? Can I wake up in Rivendell with the glowing elves and the bit of harmony, and like everything's beautiful and nice and coherent and makes sense, and friendly? You're safe. The power structure in Rivendell here is on the same side as everyone here, that kind of way. However, the higher elves have a continuity with all the different ones living there, and they live for the exaltation of that community and place, and the look of it, even physically, and the connection to their ancestors and their culture and the rest of it. And that's basically the society. It's like, am I crazy for just wanting that? It doesn't have to be perfect, but just a little bit of like, you wake up and you actually don't have to think about your whole civilizational world burning up in smoke or falling apart. And like, even when you say, oh, maybe I'm just over the top, maybe I just need to relax, maybe I just need to chill out, and if I turn off the laptops, shut the phone off, maybe if I just go out and I just chill it and relax, and if I change my attitude, because I'm the one with the issue, maybe if I do that, then I'll realize that I'm overthinking it. Relax. The world is fine, right? And you go out and you're hit with it over and over again. I find I get about 5 minutes before it's like, holy shit, that's undeniable. That's just how it is. That's just how it is. But so that's your South Port, yeah. Very sad. And of course, there's 3 parents there who are without their daughters, and these things are what they are. But that's the thing, is like, it's a basic human nature thing. You should be able to basically say, I saw someone mention on Twitter that what right could, I don't know who it was, said this. So sorry, but what right could possibly be higher than the right of your children not to be stabbed? And again, it's an interesting thought. It's like, yeah. So is there such thing as, like, they talk about positive, people talk about positive and negative rights. Do you have a right not to be stabbed? I've talked about this before myself, but like, there's no absolute right pre-crime detection system to make sure nobody ever has harm come their way. But insofar as the society can, within reason, without locking every last person up or putting everyone in a padded straitjacket or whatever, without doing that, what reasonable steps could the society take, like broad brushstrokes, that would create a society much more friendly to children not getting randomly attacked, people not getting randomly attacked, and it generally being the idea that you can leave your doors open, don't lock your bike. And this applies to foreigners, not foreigners. It's an overall principle, and I really believe in it. What kind of things would have to be done, whether authoritarian or libertarian, doesn't matter what they are, but just what sort of practices would have to be followed through on to make it so that, without having been guaranteed, of course, there could always be some psycho comes in and murders you in the middle of the night or steals your bike or whatever. But just generally speaking, for the vast majority of people, as a normal standard rule for everybody that they can have faith in, which is that you can basically leave your doors unlocked. You don't have to lock your bike. You just cycle up to a bakery or whatever, get off and go in, shopping center, whatever, just leave it there. Come back the next day and get it. It'll just be sitting there, that your kids can be safe to go play. Oh, go play, come back. And again, I'm 33 years old, right? I'm not that old. And so you'll hear a 70-year-old say, a 70, 80-year-old say, when I was a kid, we'd go play and wander around and all this all day long. We'd just be called for a dinner 6 hours later, 6 to 8 hours later. I had that, and I'm 33, and I grew up for the most part in the suburbs of Cork City. So not exactly the back of side of a mountain or whatever. Um, I'm pretty much as close as you could get to like fairly like at the center of things, right? And I grew up in a world where we went wandering around estates, far flung estates, farmers' fields, down forests, all over the place, right? And it was seen as totally standard when we were young enough, like doing this. And we had no phones, no GPS, nothing like that. And it was generally seen that, like, yeah, well, once you're beyond the age of like a stupid toddler who doesn't know what's going on, once you basically like find your way home, you know what's going on. I forget what the age was exactly. Yeah, you go out, like, you're grand. Um, Nobody sees it that way anymore. It's because it's not like that anymore. There's no way you could do that because we don't know. I'm desperately like I'm getting at that whiskey there for the last few minutes, but um, you know, people's perceptions didn't change. Like it's because we all know it. We don't know what the fuck is outside the front door anymore, or down the road. You just don't know. And to me, I feel like society has a right. There is a positive right, if that's the correct way of putting it, that you should have a right to say, I want my kid to be able to wander around, and barring some freak situation that everybody has always feared throughout history of a strange figure from the woods coming to snatch up your kid or whatever. That's primal. That's always been there. It's real. Um, but that's why we control society. That's why we say that person is fucking weird, right? Like really weird. And we might not hang them or whatever, but we're certainly keeping a close eye, right? And we're at least knowing who they are. Um, yeah, we're watching them. They're being watched, and some strange outsider who comes in. If the outsider comes in and declares their business and they're friendly and they la la la, and they slowly integrate and they stay for a while or something, it's like they'll be judged accordingly. But it's sort of with like a like howdy partner, state your business type of thing upon entry, or like, so where are you from? Who are you? Tell me about yourself. As it would have been in Ireland if a weird person, like if you're in Cork and someone from Tyrone shows up and they say, "Oh, I'm just staying here for a few weeks for some work," you'd be like, "What work are you doing?" Right? And I have a friend actually in Tyrone. Do you know him? And you would do all that because it's human nature to say, yeah, and especially if the guy seems a bit off, right? Even if he seems really nice, you would still do it. But it's human nature to say, yeah, we want to actually, we have a nice thing going here. We trust that our kids can go around. I don't even lock my back door, la la la. Um, until we know what's going on with you, then that gets thrown up in the air. So, and basically, what you have is that happening at an extreme level now. So it's basically like we're completely through the looking glass, where it's like it's it's a distant memory or whatever. But I do think it's a primal and a fundamental human right in a way to be able to say, I want to at least pursue a world where we are moving closer to bikes unlocked, house unlocked, kids wandering free. It might not be attainable yet, but at least the direction of travel is moving towards more that as opposed to less that. And that's what's happening in the West, is that we're hurtling at hundreds of miles an hour against our will in the wrong direction on that. And everybody's sort of waving their hands, being like, what's going on? So, including Dapper Laughs. Maybe I rambled the shit out of it tonight. I don't know. Sorry. But anyway, look, I'll read some super chats, see what's up. So, Roddy, good to hear from you. Gives 5, thank you very much, and says, white people have to stand up for themselves. Every other race does it. In 2 sentences, we've gone from, oh my God, that's hateful, to, no, it's just normal. Yeah. Yeah, true. Another one from Roddy here too. Says, did you get started on the garden? How's it going? I actually didn't, but I do have rhubarb. I forgot to mention that last time. I have rhubarb. Rhubarb grows by itself, basically. I harvested some of that, sauteed it. That was nice. So, but no, not much more. There's some wildflowers. We have an apple tree, two apple trees. One apple tree that was mature, it's like 80 years old, and one that we brought our own ourselves. We're going to plant. So I kind of gotten started on it. Would say, but thank you. Michael Fairclough said two, no comment. Thanks again. Roddy, another two, says, where do you think the West will be in 5 years? Good question. I'm not some sort of prognosticator necessarily, but it's a really good question, isn't it? Like, where will the West be in 5 years? For all I know, the West in 5 years will be mid World War III. I'm not saying I think that's likely or probable, but it's not impossible and it's not highly unlikely with the Russia, Taiwan, Iran, all that stuff, right? And then the internal, like if you take the control grid matrix off the West now, look at the likes of Kulak, look at the likes of the state of Birmingham with like Paris and all these places and the local, the native pushback against it, and it's a big, huge powder keg. And if you take the foot off the throat of that shit show, even slightly because of external issues or collapse in some way, partial collapse or whatever, just fraying, Europe will be an absolute fucking nightmare shit show. And all the external pressures are there, the Russias and the Taiwans and all that. And then the economic thing, the economic like big head full of steam from like it's like a version of 2008 but different, and it's sort of mutually interdependent with the foreigner replacement thing. The economic thing is tied up in that too, so it's like this crash course, and I feel like the crash course is set for a collision probably within the 5 years. So I don't know exactly what it looks like, but it's maybe, or maybe in 5 years it'll just be coasting along as it is now, just worse. I don't know, but I feel like it has to be hitting some sort of moment, or not even moment. It doesn't have to be a moment, but like I don't think it's just going to coast on. I think it is going to all fall apart like a house of cards in some fashion. I think it'll probably happen quite radically. Maybe not in a single moment, but over the course of a yearish or something. It'll just be like there'll be 1 year where you look back on the year before and think, wow, everything's unrecognizable. You know, you'll think last year feels like it was 100 million years ago, given everything that's happened. What all that stuff will be, we'll see. That's just how I feel. Dennis Carr gives €10 and says, Chucky Girl, sure, hopefully. Or, well, it will, of course. And thank you for that, of course. Angela Gardner, 2 super sticker, no comment. Thank you. Finola 5 with the super sticker. Thank you very much. And Angel Martin, $5 says, I see American men saying everywhere, I won't fight for a nation that hates me. Men are the nation. Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying too. Yeah. Like, yeah, nation that hates me. It's kind of like, well, what you're talking about is the power, the like hostile invader, not invader, but like the hostile traitor power structure, basically. So it's like that's not the nation. Like they are in control of your nation. They're in control of your life effectively, and they have like openly bear no resemblance to you or no shared interest at all with you. So it's basically like if you're Nazi occupied Paris, or and these are two very different things, of course, but Soviet occupied Germany or American occupied Japan or Mongol occupied Baghdad or whatever, just like it's the equivalent of that. So that's what's really going on, right? So to say I won't fight for a nation that hates me, it's like if I don't know, yeah, it's like Soviet occupied, you know, Berlin, like 6 months after the Soviet occupation in the Soviet zone, someone being like pointing at the Soviets and saying, I won't fight for that nation who hate me. It's like, well, that's not your nation. Like, so, you know, clarify the terms a little bit. I think people are a little bit confused that way, but yeah. Thank you for that. And I think there's another one. Angel again, Martin with $5 says that would make us. Sorry, I didn't read these out in time as you made them. Sorry, I just read them out at the end. But that would make us no better than these people who flee their own mess to take refuge under another race of men. Yeah, I assume you're referring to like Bhutan and all that. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. Like it just kind of be you could say hypocritical in a way or whatever to flee off for a better life and all that, which is the cliche. But one of the reasons I don't think fleeing is very good is because inevitably, if you run from these problems, it just follows you. Like if you say, "I'll move to Porto," I hear Porto's nicer. A certain neighborhood in Barcelona is nice or something. It's like you won't be too long. Like it'll be your kids or whatever. Like you can't just hide in a little place. Even the Bhutan or Osaka or whatever. It's like, yeah, the same things you're running away. Like if you run from them, then those things will follow you. It's sort of like you actually can only turn around and just face it. I think otherwise you're just buying a little bit of comfort time, really. But because it's like if you think like if everybody in the world thinks like Dapper Laughs, then where do we end up? An entire planet full of slaves or whatever. It basically does end up being like that because yeah, logically that's what happens, isn't it? If everybody in the whole world took the Dapper Laughs idea, well then it's just a free ride, like a straight shot, easy run for the people who are doing it, the people who've done it. England so far, they can do it everywhere. They can do it to China and Russia. They can do it to Palestinians, you name it, they could do it to everybody because everybody has just decided to say, well, I'm just going to run away to the nearest comfortable place or whatever. It's just a world of refugees, all of us. So Roddy back in with another 2. George Floyd and Mossad are both in the chat. Weird, interesting. And George Floyd back from the other side of the grave, like he's talking. Is he in the chat? There's a funny clip, by the way. It's years ago. I don't know if it's still available. It probably is there, but it was a live stream. Like I've done, like I'm rambling now, but I've done like even more rambly streams back in the day. I was younger and sort of more like novice-y. I was more like freaked out live streaming and stuff, let's say. But it was the night or the day that the George Floyd thing had happened. Derek Chauvin, the knee on the neck, the cop, the outrage and all that. And I went live and I was like, just like tonight where I was trying to say that Southport is in Manchester when it's actually in Liverpool. I sort of had I had a big spiel on George Floyd, like maybe a decent political take on it, but the basic detail I had wrong once again, which was that I was calling him Floyd George like for half the stream, and I've always wanted to go back and find it and just edit it, just the bits out because I'd say it's fucking hilarious. I'm like, Floyd George had his so the guy was kneeling on Floyd George's neck, but little did I know at the time that was George Floyd was going to become whatever, a deity almost or whatever. I didn't know that was going to happen. So anyway, thanks, Roddy. So Armchair Limerick Nationalist says sound for the stream or whatever. So the governments clearly don't give a shit about all of these attacks. They're clearly insane. What can we do about it? I don't know. Like, I just talk about it, but I don't know what to do about it. It's actually crazy. That's my take at the moment. I'm in all out of ideas for tonight. All I can say is it's crazy. I don't know. Just watch it fall apart, I suppose. Just like point and go up. It's kind of what we're doing, isn't it? But and then Roddy with another 5 says it's good for the economy, quote unquote. To be honest, I'd rather be a bit more poor, but at least the kids would be able to walk the streets. Yeah, easily. And the poverty is relative as well, like because you could be poor like in a certain ways, like not be able to afford many consumer goods, but you could afford your house and could have access to like abundant, cheap local food. As in, you could have like access to lots of local beef and butter and potatoes and all that kind of stuff, but you wouldn't be able to get a mango in December, or whatever. Like that sort of level of, it's different forms of abundance, different forms of choice and poverty, let's say. you know Definitely, if you had the more local limited consumer choice, but you did sort of own your house and your few basic bits of stuff, and your kids could roam freely, I think a lot of people would take that at this point now over the December mangoes and the Netflix and microwave, poppadoms or whatever. It's I think most people would make that choice. So anyway, that's all the super chats for tonight. I'm going to leave it there. I'll be back soon to talk about the other story from tonight. It just went on a bit, well, a long stream. Okay, yeah, and thank you all for joining me in the chat. Thank you, of course, for the super chats, and anybody else who supports the channel and just joins in and watches. Always good, always enjoy it, and like I say, I'll be back soon. So for tonight, take care of yourselves. Ihawa. See you.